Greetings, class! Today we are working with watercolors, and a few things to know. I have my watercolor set, I have my watercolor paper with my drawing on it, a variety of brushes, and of course a paper towel so I can clean my brushes between each color. This is a small Chinese brush. I have a tiny detail brush and a large brush for large areas. Now, I have my painting and I'm going to think about how I can clean up this watercolor set. There's some colors that are combined in here, like I see a little bit of orange and the yellow. So I'm just going to take my paper towel, dip it in water, and clean up those mixed colors. Now here, I'm starting with a wash. A wash is when you take water and add it to an area and use a tiny bit of paint to give a wet and wet distribution of paint. So the more water I use, the lighter my color will be. And I'm using a large brush because this is a large area. If I were using a tiny brush, it would take really long. But I am going to use my tiny brush to get right up to those edges where my large brush is too big to fit. Just taking my time and trying to get in those little nooks and crannies. Now next up, I'm going to use what's called the wet on dry technique. So my paintbrush is wet, but my paper is dry, and that gives a darker color. Wet on dry. And I'm taking my time, enjoying the process. Not going too fast so that I can get a nice clean edge where I put every spot of color. The secret to watercolor isn't only water, but patience, developing a steady hand. Now, I've seen some students that try to rush through and put random colors on their project, use a little bit of brown, a little bit of black. Now, black takes over your painting really fast. And when you rush through something, you may not be as happy with it. So when you're painting, when you're doing anything in art, this is time to slow down and really invest your effort and energy. The more work you put into something, the more you get out of it, the more enjoyment. Now I have made a little bit more progress here, and I just want to review those techniques. So here I'm starting with a wash, adding water before I add paint, and then I'm putting a little bit of paint down for that wet and wet technique. And again, utilizing my brushes, finding the best tool for the job. A tiny brush for those smaller areas, and trying to develop a steady hand. Again, the wet on dry technique is when you take a wet brush, dip it in the pigment, the paint, and then put it directly onto your painting. It's a little bit darker. The more water you add to your paint, the lighter it will be, and the less water you add, the darker it will be. It's nice to find a happy medium. I can take my tiny detail brush and add some more lines now that my first layer has dried, and essentially just draw with my little detail brush. So I'm excited to watercolor with you guys, and I hope you enjoy.